A common perception of a gifted and talented student is of a precocious, well-behaved child who masters subjects earlier and learns quicker than other children. They are perceived as universally gifted and obtaining high grades in all areas of learning. But this is only partially true. They may be ridiculed with labels such as geek and nerd, neglected and misunderstood. In a mixed ability classroom, they may find the material unchallenging and they can become bored, inattentive and disruptive. They may also be socially isolated. In an attempt to gain social acceptance, become underachievers, which makes it hard to identify them as gifted. Gifted students need a supporting family and a positive learning experience provided by teachers in order for them to reach their full potential. Albert Einstein and Stephen Hawking are labelled as gifted and talented because of their outstanding intellect and academic achievements. But what about people like David Helfgott? He is a great concert pianist but also suffers from a severe mental disability, which makes it hard for him to function autonomously in society. Can David be labelled as gifted and talented? The short answer is yes. The fact is, many people are unevenly gifted, meaning they can have a learning disability in one area but be gifted in another. For example, students with extremely strong mathematical and spatial abilities often have average or even deficient verbal abilities. To this point, an analysis of 20 world-class mathematicians found that many of them only learned to read when attending school. Yet, most academically gifted students learn to read before starting school, and that 6 of these mathematicians had trouble reading. So what do we mean by gifted and talented? Gifted and talented are broad concepts with no one universally accepted definition. Many definitions, such as the one shown here, refer to superior intellect, but fail to draw a distinction between what is giftedness and what is talented. In Australia today, the differential model of giftedness and talent put forward by Canadian psychologist Dr. Francois Gagné provides the most generally accepted definitions of both giftedness and talented. In the D&G model, gifts, also known as natural ability, aptitude, or potential, are broken down into mental and physical gifts. Mental gifts are things such as intellectual, creative, such as inventiveness, social, such as leadership, perceptual, such as vision and hearing. Physical gifts are muscular, such as strength and speed, or motor control, such as quick reflexes and balance. These gifts can be used as building blocks and transformed into achievements in the fields of academia through to sports. The DMG model builds on this distinction of gifts and achievements to define someone as gifted if they possess outstanding potential and someone as talented if they display outstanding achievement. But what do we mean by outstanding? Let's start by looking at potential, which will vary between students and normally distributed in a bell-shaped curve that's shown here. 50% of the students have potential that lie in the middle of the spectrum and defined as having average potential. The lower 25% may be described as students with learning difficulties. The top 25% of students have above average potential, but the students whose potential places them in the top 10% of their aged peers are defined as gifted. Gagné defines potential from low to high as deficient, slow, average, superior, and gifted for the top 10%. Similarly, achievement is defined as incompetent, low, competent, performing, and talented for those whose achievements places them in the top 10% of their aged peers. So, in summary, a gifted student is one whose potential places them in the top 10%, and a talented student is one whose achievement places them in the top 10%. Also note that some students may be gifted in one or more areas, and some students may be gifted in one area but have a disability in another. A teacher needs to identify gifted students to help them maximise the realisation of their potential. Just like slow learners, gifted students deserve an education commensurate with their capabilities. Gifted and talented students have different learning needs from their peers and therefore need special educational planning to support them in developing their full potential. Despite being gifted, they will not make it on their own. 10 to 20% of high school dropouts are gifted and almost inevitably underachievers because they feel unchallenged and unmotivated. They need an appropriate learning experience which may include peer acceptance, mentoring and encouragement to avert underachievement. Coaches transform outstanding potential into outstanding achievements. Transformation happens through activities such as systematic training and motivation. The higher the level of talent sought, the more intense these activities become. In a classroom, students need the appropriate learning experience to transform outstanding potential into outstanding achievement. In the movie Good Will Hunting, Will Hunting's outstanding gift is solving complex maths problems, but he chooses to work as a low-skilled construction worker because he feels unchallenged by maths classes. Will needs an appropriate learning experience to maximise the realisation of his potential, because innate experience on his own is never enough. Will is a gifted underachiever because of the discrepancy between his potential and his achievement. Remember, a student can be gifted without being talented. Teachers need to be able to identify gifted underachievers and provide them with a learning experience that transforms their giftedness into talent. So, how does one identify giftedness? Well, that depends on the type of giftedness being sought. For example, when looking for outstanding potential in a baseball pitcher, a radar gun is used to measure how fast he throws a ball. When looking for outstanding potential in a marathon runner, a physiologist measures how efficiently oxygen is used. However, schools tend to look out for outstanding intelligence because it is the best single predictor of academic achievement. There is no universal definition of intelligence. However, a good definition is the one proposed by American psychologist Linda Gottfredson, who defines it as the ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn and memorize quickly, and learn from experience. Intelligence is measured using IQ tests because they are the best single predictors of academic achievements. Firstly, we need to understand what IQ test scores represent. If we took everybody's IQ score and plotted them, they would be normally distributed and form a bell-shaped curve as shown. The score in the absolute center is 100, and the majority of students will have IQ scores within 1 standard deviation above and 1 standard deviation below, and defined as having average intelligence. Students with IQ scores 2 standard deviations above 100, that is, between 115 and 130, are defined as mildly gifted, and so on, until we get to the profoundly gifted, which is less than 1 in 1 million students. Note, these definitions vary slightly between IQ tests. And just for reference, Einstein's IQ was reported to be 160 plus. IQ tests are not without controversy, and some gifted students can be overlooked if IQ tests were the only means of identifying them. IQ tests can be biased towards the environment in which they were developed, namely white Western society. IQ tests fail to recognize different cultural values of intelligence. What might be considered intelligent in one community may not be in another. This makes IQ tests problematic in culturally diverse settings such as Australia. For example, knowledge of bush foods is seen as a form of intelligence in some communities, but it does not correlate with high performance on traditional Western IQ tests. In addition, lack of exposure to middle-class English and the mainstream dominant culture leads to children from ethnic minorities being underrepresented in gifted education. An example of cultural bias can be seen in this video clip.
Sleep in a house, 3 bedrooms, and a double bed in each room.
What was your answer?
18.
18?
Yeah. We know people who get 3 in a bed, 2 on 6 in the couch, 1 in the bathroom.
Similarly wrong answers are given when the tables are turned.
Question number one. If there's no water in the house, how did you take a shower?
Well, obviously you can't.
Wrong. You wait for me to turn on the fire hydrant, run out the street with your underwear. Name three different kinds of blue.
Three kinds of blue. Well, there's azure, indigo, and baby blue.
Wrong. Where we come from, the three blues are Lowdown, Barrel House, and Goodman.
Although a high IQ score is valid evidence of intellectual giftedness, an average or low IQ score may be misleading due to cultural bias. This highlights the need for multiple criteria to be used to identify gifted students. Other means of identifying gifted students include subjective and objective measures. Subjective measures allow judgments to be made based on observations of the student. Parental judgments are valuable because no one else knows the child better than their parent. For example, parents know the ages at which their child acquired speech, reading, and numeracy. Parental checklists like this help record this valuable information. Teacher observations can also be recorded on a checklist. Gifted underachievers are unlikely to be identified only by looking at positive behaviours. Therefore, the checklist also needs to include negative behaviours. Teacher checklists can avoid unintended bias towards students who are middle-class English speakers and simply turn in neat work on time. Objective measures provide scores that can be used to compare students. IQ tests are administered individually by psychologists, which makes them expensive to conduct, and as previously noted, can suffer from cultural biases. Aptitude tests are typically administered in small groups. Unlike IQ tests, which measure general intelligence with a single score, aptitude tests measure various aspects of intelligence such as verbal, numerical, and mechanical reasoning, and scores them individually in order to help identify specific areas of potential or giftedness. Standardized achievements tests. These are administered on a statewide or national level. These tests, such as NAPLAN, measure a student's current level of achievement, not their potential, in a specific area such as maths or reading. Because they only measure current achievement, they can easily overlook gifted underachievers. Curriculum compacting is one method used to teach gifted and talented students. It is implemented by eliminating content already mastered and replacing it with more challenging work while taking into account the student's own interests. This avoids wasting time on content already mastered by the student and mitigates the risk of the student losing interest and motivation. This method should only be used after the student has demonstrated mastery of the content to be eliminated through something such as a pre-assessment test. Students who may benefit from this method are those who, amongst other things, demonstrate consistently working quickly, are high performers, and express interest in pursuing advanced topics. I hope you found this presentation informative, and thank you for listening.